My mother-in-law from hell made my wedding all about her, then walked in on us. I, 25 female, just married my husband Mark, 25 male, less than a year ago. This story is going to begin with some background, then to the engagement, then the wedding, then the main event. My apologies for any typos. I'm dyslexic and sometimes autocorrect just makes my typos worse. Buckle up, this is a long one. My mother-in-law Eleanor, Ellie for short, has 2 sons, Mark and his younger brother Brian. Brian is 23 for context. Ellie has always wanted a daughter, but unfortunately never had the daughter she always dreamed of. When Mark and I started dating almost 10 years ago, she immediately accepted me as her daughter, and I was grateful for that. I didn't have a great relationship with my own mother, so having that positive female role model to look up to at that age was nice to have. Fast forward to last year, Mark and I were talking about getting engaged. Mark had a whole proposal planned out and a perfect date that meant something to both of us, but also wasn't obvious, so I would be surprised. Surprising me was something incredibly important to Mark. About 2 months before the date, Mark, Ellie and I were sitting in my in-laws' house talking about the engagement. I jokingly asked when it was going to be, then started listing every day from the current day until I got to the day. I was saying things like November 2nd, what about November 3rd, November 4th, and I kept this bit going for a while. When I finally got to the actual day, Mark kept his perfect poker face, but Ellie jumped in her seat and flashed a shocked look at Mark. I pretended to not notice and just continued listening dates, but the damage was done. I now knew the date he had picked, and if he knew that, I knew he would be crushed. I really want to emphasize that I had no idea that was the date, and I started guessing dates months before and kept the bit going for 5 minutes or more before I got to the date. It's not like I guessed it on the first try. Honestly, I hadn't really guessed it at all. Her overreaction ruined the surprise. I tried to put the date out of my head, and on the day of, I decided to try my hardest to not think about Ellie's reaction to my guess and pretend like Mark and I were just going out on a regular old date. I met Mark at his parents' house, and Ellie immediately hugged me and started saying, "You're finally going to be my daughter." If I didn't know before, I knew then, but I still continued playing dumb. I excused myself to use the restroom, and when I came out, I overheard Ellie talking to Mark, loudly pawing at his pocket saying, "Let me see the ring one more time before she comes out." I just sighed to myself and went back to the bathroom, this time to loudly open the door to alert them I was coming so they could stop talking about the ring. Mark had worked so hard to make this a surprise for me, and I couldn't ruin it for him. So when he did pop the question, I just had to act surprised to spare his feelings. To this day, I don't have the heart to tell him that I knew for months and that Ellie had ruined the surprise. Obviously, I said yes, and the wedding planning began. Mark and I had talked for years about having a non-traditional wedding, and just having my friend who was ordained sign the papers for us. I'm very much an introvert, so having a day that I was the center of attention on was not a priority for me. I would have been okay with just me and Mark signing some paperwork in our PJs, but unfortunately where we live it requires witnesses to be legally married. We discussed just going to the courthouse, but Ellie freaked out. She insisted we needed a real wedding. Before I could even think about it or agree to it, she got her church to send over availability and messaged her distant relative who is a retired priest to see if he would perform the wedding ceremony for free. I have never met this person before, and I felt very uncomfortable having a stranger at my wedding. Little did I know, but he had agreed to do it for free, so it was hard to say no. Her church also agreed to let us use the space for a major discount, so again, hard to say no to a money-saving opportunity. I told Mark that if I was going to go through with this real wedding, then the guest list needed to be under 100 or I simply couldn't do it. He agreed, and we started making a list of who we wanted to invite. Me and him made a list of the most important people, and we listed about 50 people. I thought this was perfect, but Ellie lost it. She was horrified that we didn't invite any of her aunts, uncles, cousins, or other distant relatives. She insisted that it was her son's wedding, and that she should have a say in her son's day. Mark and I explained that I had never met any of those people, and many of those people Mark had never met, and we really didn't want people there we didn't know. Ellie threw a tantrum that it's her family and we shouldn't exclude them, and her tantrum was so unbearable that we just agreed and added them to the list to shut her up. Mark told me not to worry though, because he had a plan. We ended up picking a date that lined up with when all of her distant relatives go on vacation to Florida, so none of them could make it to the wedding. Because we invited them, many of them felt obligated to send us a card with a check slipped in, so it did actually end up working out that we invited them. But it really sucked that Ellie felt the need to control our guest list. We really didn't have to plan a lot. 100% invites and only around 50 people not showing up, yes, so it was a low-effort wedding. I am not a very girly girl, so I just decided to order a dress online. This dress was actually a steal because no one even guessed it was only $50. They thought I had spent at least $1,000 at a bridal shop. I was very proud of my online find, but Ellie was livid. She told me I betrayed her and robbed her of her experience of taking her baby girl wedding dress shopping. I told her I didn't take anyone shopping, so she really didn't miss anything, and that it wasn't personal that I excluded her. I just don't enjoy shopping or dresses, and I just wanted something quick and easy. She did not like that response. She demanded I send her pictures of me in the dress and I said no. I was afraid she would show Mark or worse post it. So I told her I wouldn't be sending pictures to anyone or even taking pictures of myself in it at all. She would just have to wait for the day. Now for the wedding. I have no build up for this one, so I'm just going to come out and say it. Ellie wore white to my wedding. I showed up at the church early to get ready and she was already there, already dressed, and had no plans on changing. My awesome Mo jokingly said she would spill some wine on it for me, but we just decided to ignore her and move on. When it came time for pictures, Ellie made herself the main character. We hired a family friend of mine who wants to be a photographer to do our pictures. She offered to do it for free, but we really believed that since she was providing a service, then she should be paid, and she was. Anytime the photographer posed us, Ellie would try to jump in front of her with her phone, or call our attention to her so we would look at her phone and not the photographer's camera. So many nice group pictures were ruined because no one knew what camera to look at. If we refused to look at the camera, Ellie threw a tantrum and sometimes would physically push us back into place so she could get her shots too. She also stepped on my dress quite a few times in the process, and when confronted about it stated that it wasn't her fault I picked something with such a long train. At the actual ceremony, Ellie was mostly behaved. She sat in the front row with her phone out the entire time and sobbing, but she sobbed silently and stayed in her seat, so I can't complain. Before the reception could even begin, Ellie posted pictures of the wedding and announced the wedding before I even got a chance to. This was a small wedding, so not a lot of people knew about it. I really wanted the chance to announce it, but she stole that opportunity too. And not only that, but she posted the worst pictures because no one was looking at her phone and no one was properly posed for her pictures. During the reception, we had the cake set up in the corner. It was so tucked away that there was really only space for me, my husband, and a photographer while we cut the cake. We snuck back with the photographer to cut the cake and get pictures, and Ellie screamed, "Wait, I'm not ready," while running across the reception hall trying to load up her camera. We ignored her and she missed the picture she wanted. She demanded the photographer move out of her way so we could reenact the cake cutting so she could get the shot. As soon as she got her picture, she took her seat at the sweetheart's table, not where she was actually supposed to sit, and demanded to be served. My husband and I decided to just serve the cake and use that as our time to walk around and mingle with everybody. Ellie was pissed she did not get to sit and eat cake with her baby. We did not care. After the reception, we had a barbecue back at my in-laws' house. We did this to accommodate the fact that my family does not drink, and his family drinks enough for both families. My family got an alcohol-free reception, then his got the alcohol-filled reception. Ellie got absolutely poop-faced. Drank to the point of throwing up, was an absolute roller coaster of emotions, cornered guests to flirt and cry and joke with, and God only knows what else. I have never seen her that drunk before. She was absolutely horrid. And for the whole barbecue, she stayed in her white dress even after I changed out of mine. My husband and I had planned on spending the night at his parents' house in his childhood room because it was closer to the airport and we had to catch an early morning flight to our honeymoon. After the reception, I was absolutely drained, very done with people and very annoying with Ellie's behavior all day, and I just wanted to shower and go to bed. I am a very modest person, and I don't want to be in my PJs in front of other people. I don't wear anything super sexy or anything like that to bed, but definitely not anything I'm comfortable wearing in front of my in-laws. Before showering, I made sure my in-laws were in bed, and when I got out of the shower, my husband made sure she was still in bed. I came out of the shower and we went to his room and I began changing out of my robe and into my PJs. While we were changing, my mother-in-law burst through the door. My chest was completely exposed, so I grabbed the robe and wrapped it around myself. I won't go into details, but I have a history of SA, so that just made this experience so much more violating to me. To my horror, my mother-in-law was not only in the room but in the room with her phone camera open, trying to get us to begin opening presents because she wanted pictures and didn't want my family friend hogging all the pictures. I was absolutely horrified and couldn't even speak. I curled up in a ball crying and just wanting to unalived. My husband was also speechless, as he was also changing and also partially exposed. My mother-in-law was too drunk to even notice this fact. I finally looked at my husband and just said, "Help." I could barely get that word out. He then grabbed a towel and yelled at his mother to get out of the room and to not come back in. He came over to me and held me until I was able to calm down enough to be able to speak. He promised me that she was so drunk that anything she saw she wouldn't remember, but to this day, I still can't shake that violated feeling. She spent the next couple of hours crying that we would treat her so horribly on her special day. Well, he was right. She was so drunk that she had absolutely no idea what she had walked in on. The next morning, while we were trying to get out the door to catch our flight, she began crying again about the way she was treated the night before. She stated that she was horrified that I would blow her off like that, and not even look at her or speak to her, and she couldn't believe I made her own son yell at her the way he had the night before. Before walking out the door, I just looked at her and said, "We were changing, we were naked, sorry you didn't get to photograph my teats last night," and walked away. She began screaming, crying again, saying, "I was just making that up to be dramatic. Sure, I'm the dramatic one," but we just ignored her and left for our honeymoon. A week in paradise, Ellie texting us every day demanding pictures. Sometimes we would reply, sometimes not, usually not. We enjoyed our Ellie-free week. She has just never been the same. From the second engagement was on the table, she became a mother-in-law from hell.